Hello, welcome to the League One review podcast from the lower league. Look, as ever, myself, Seb, joined by Jamie to record the review episode, talking all about Saturday's actions in the third tier. Jamie, how are you doing? How was your weekend?
Hello, yeah, I'm good, thank you. An all right weekend, a busy one with Lincoln City on the Saturday, of course, and we're sure we'll talk about that. That is an unbelievable game again. They just keep scoring. So, yeah, a good weekend, a hectic Saturday afternoon with that one. But yeah, not too bad. How about yourself?
I can imagine, yeah, very busy. Less can be said for myself at Oakwell on Saturday. Didn't quite live up to the number of goals that you saw at Lincoln, but I'm sure we'll gloss over Barnsley's result on Saturday. And then Sunday, I was at Bramall Lane covering Sheffield United women, so that was cool. First ever professional women's game that I've attended and was fortunate enough to commentate on. So that was pretty cool. But yeah, football heavy weekend, so very busy. Yeah, feeling it. I think this morning I had
Yeah.
a really nice lie-in. So yeah, but I enjoyed it. So
Yes,
yeah,
that's fair. It's
a
football
good week.
heavy and a busy Saturday for League One as well. Just lots of big games that we're going to talk about. And it was definitely a big weekend.
Yeah, absolutely. Lots of talking points from the top all the way down to the bottom. It keeps just getting just more exciting as we are entering now the getting towards that final sort of stretch of the league to go. Most teams do only have 7 to play so far this season. A couple of teams with a few games in hand as well, but the majority have all played 39 games so far in this League One season. We're going to start by chatting a little bit about the automatic spots. We move on to discuss Lincoln and their fine form, and then after the break, we'll sort of discuss the rest of the fixtures, if you like, that took place on Saturday in League One. So, without further ado, let's get straight into this one, Jamie, and chat about things at the top of the table.
Yeah, so it's I guess the first big game to talk about is the top of the table, Portsmouth, their win away at Peterborough, and sort of it keeps the same distance from second for them, with Derby winning that we'll talk about, but it extends the gap to third, so that automatic spot a little bit more assured. I can't say ensured just yet because obviously, like you said, 7 games to go. And they've got a few big games to go in that. But Portsmouth, 12 games unbeaten now. Poor Peterborough, on the other hand, their unbeaten run comes to an end, obviously, with that one. And it's the first time they failed to score in a game since January when they drew out a goalless draw at Lincoln. It's only happened one more time this season for them as well. I think in November. I believe it's the first time it's happened at home that they've been shut out. So a huge result for Portsmouth. Obviously keeps them at the top of the table, keeps them ticking along nicely. And yeah, they're in such superb form. And to keep out a Peterborough side who are putting in the goals these last few games is no easy feat.
Yeah, Posh were on a 5-match winning streak prior to the game on Saturday, unbeaten by a goal from Yengi, the Portsmouth striker. That's now his 9th goal of the season for Pompey. Just coming into this one, I know we spoke a little bit last week, and I'm sure yourself and Callum did on this sort of preview episode, in that, overall, about the two fixtures regarding the top 4. Did what? Well, what? Firstly, what did you predict in terms of who was going to win? And are you surprised Peterborough couldn't continue their sort of winning streak against Portsmouth?
Well, I'm delighted you've asked me that question, Seb, because I got the predictions right, which I'm delighted about.
Good. I'm glad to hear it.
The scores, not so much. I predicted a few goals in these 2 games, but I got the results right. I thought Portsmouth would beat Peterborough. The shock is that they haven't scored. And I did think Derby would win, and obviously they did as well. So I was happy on that respect. So yeah, I wasn't surprised that Portsmouth won. I thought they were the safest bet going in, even though they were away from home. And it's just that class they've got, even though how many injuries they've had this season, how many important players that have dropped out for long periods. I mean, they brought Regan Poole in the summer, and he's been injured for a long part of this season. And I mean, they're doing so well to still not just be in the mix, but be so comfortably at the summit and look so assured right at the top. And yeah, so they've been doing fantastic. And it was a result I expected, even if the scoreline wasn't quite what I thought.
Yeah, only one goal in it, and that result does see Portsmouth, I think you mentioned this a little bit earlier, take a 5-point gap on second place Derby. Do you think that's where they'll be coming the end of the season? Do you think they'll maintain that top spot? Now they've got a little bit of a gap between them and the rest of the teams in the division.
I think so. They've got to sort of play a few of the teams around them. I know they've got to play Barnsley and Bolton before the end of the season, which aren't easy games, obviously, by any stretch of the imagination. And the big game is obviously Portsmouth versus Derby, which will happen before the end of the season. So yeah, some huge games. They're all sort of playing each other, which is, I guess, the interesting part about it, because it could still be anyone. But I'd be surprised if they sort of fluff their lines from here. They look so comfortable at the top, and they're pulling out results left, right, and centre. They're in such great form, and it's exactly the form you want to be in at this time of the season. And yeah, so I expect them to hold on to the league title. If they don't, I'd be shocked if they didn't get automatics at the very least. But I do think they will secure that league title, and it looks deserved on the way they've been playing so far this season.
Absolutely, yes. So they are currently top of the tree in the in the rankings currently in League One. And as for the other game regarding the two top four teams, it's Derby at home against Bolton. He sort of gave it away a little bit there, Jamie, but Derby did manage to snatch the victory. It was only 1-0, and it was the smallest man on the pitch, Kane Wilson, that sort of popped up with a header pretty near the end, to be fair, 78 minutes on the clock. Well, firstly, before we get into it, a crowd of over 32,000 there, which is absolutely amazing for third-tier English football. You know, I know Derby fans, Derby are a well-supported club in general, but for them sort of numbers in League One, is brilliant, and Bolton bringing quite a few over as well from Lancashire. Another one that didn't have many goals, it only had the one. Were you surprised by the scorer of the singular goal in the game?
Yeah, well, he should have been Dwight Gale. He's been on flying form, hasn't he? If you're putting someone on to score, you're putting on Dwight Gale at the minute. But no, it's an interesting one. It was always going to be close, wasn't it? Even if it's not one I predicted would just have the one goal. But I did think it'd have the one goal in it, if you get what I mean. And yeah, it reads the same on the stats. It was a very close game in that respect. The form, I think, is where it becomes interesting, because Bolton have been really inconsistent of late. Obviously, that loss at Wigan a couple of weeks ago, a big loss in terms of sort of a local derby there. But that huge win in midweek, they beat Oxford 5-0, who sort of find themselves in the playoffs now, and they've not been able to carry on that form, which I guess that's the disappointing part. Sorry, for Bolton, in that they've not been able to take that step and carry on from a 5-0 win and sort of create that into a bit of form, because they've come off the back of it and lost straight away. Derby are in good form on the flip side of that, 4 wins on the spin for them, and they've only conceded 1 goal in that stretch. So that's sort of the key, isn't it? If you're keeping goals out, that's half the battle. So it keeps them there and thereabouts, both for the sides really, but obviously Derby in the better situation.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned Dwight Gale, because he was actually brought off after 21 minutes. I think it was an injury. He got he pulled up and had to go. So he was replaced by Corey Smith, a midfielder. And with that, I think there was a slight tweak in formation on the pitch. There's no sort of out-and-out number 9. And then Paul Warne goes and makes a triple substitution at half-time. So he brings off 3 key players, let's say. So Ward, who was playing right wing back, Curran midfielder, and Tom Barkhausen all off. And on come Kane Wilson, who eventually would go to get the winner. Thompson and Martin Wagon as well. So then from half time, there was an out and out number 9 on the pitch for Derby. Well, do you think had Derby not got the win, though, that the triple substitute would have backfired a little bit.
Well,
Do you
it's
think
always one of them, isn't it? It's all looked in hindsight. It's obviously come off and it's a masterstroke and he's had a great bit of inspiration. And if they'd have lost, it would have been it's all Paul Warren's fault. So it's one of those, isn't it? It comes and goes depending on the result. But I do think Paul Warren maybe gets a little bit of a bad rap at times because I think he's obviously a very good manager. He's got a good team at his disposal and one of the best in the league. But he's got them into second and he's doing a great job with that Derby team. And I think he's a very good manager. He's got his head screwed on. Is probably the way you'd best describe Paul Warren. Screwed on underneath that famous bobble hat. So I think it's
not
it's
that we can see it. Yeah, not that we can see his head, but
obviously it's worked though. Like you mentioned, obviously the substitute coming on and scoring that impact there, and Waghorn sort of adds a focal point, doesn't he, up front that is obviously helpful in a situation like that where you're playing someone so close to you. It's a close game. It's a game of inches in a way. And a person like Waghorn can really help. So it looked a great substitution on paper, and obviously it turned out to be successful. So the first and second teams in the division win against the third and the fourth. So it's maybe service as usual more than anything else.
And we've covered a little bit there about Derby, and they've got the 3 points now after the result at Pride Park. But what about Bolton? Because you mentioned before that they have, the past couple of weeks have been a little bit inconsistent. Adbayeja, the strikers, has been ruled out with injury, so Collins and Bodvarsson were in from the start for them. What do you make to them, and do you think this result will have a big impact on the rest of the season?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting one because the way I sort of described it in sort of my notes for this is that they're knocking on the door of automatics, but they just need a bit of consistency, and they've just not got it at the minute. They're 4 points off Derby in second, and I've been focusing on the run-ins a little bit, and included in that run-in for Bolton, they've got Stevenage, Portsmouth, and Peterborough. So it's a difficult. I mean, 7. I think they've got 8 games, haven't they, with a game in hand? But 3 of those are really difficult games, and it doesn't get any easier for a team that has been a bit inconsistent, conceding a few goals some weeks, scoring a lot of goals the next week, and it's just they blow hot and cold. And it's not the form of a team that's going to get automatic promotion because they can't afford to not turn up every week in a run-in that you have to be picking up points because there's so many teams up there and fighting for the same spots. So I think it's worrying signs from a Bolton perspective. But obviously the writing's not on the wall yet. There's still 7 games to go and 4 points can be overturned. It's just a couple of games, isn't it, to flip that on its head. So not over yet, but they've left themselves a bit of a hill to climb.
Absolutely. And I'm going to ask you a really cliche question here. But if we look at the stats, Bolton, more possession, Bolton, more corners, but Derby got the win. It's... but both teams had the same amount of shots on target. So Derby had 10 shots, 3 on target. Bolton had 6 shots, 3 on target. So from that, Bolton clearly have sort of got a better shot accuracy, but ultimately they don't have the goal to claim for it, if you like.
Well, I'll give you the cliche answer that the only stat that matters is the goals tally, and Derby won 1-0. So
I knew that would come.
But no. I get what you mean. It does read like it was a tight game on the stats. Obviously, like we mentioned, I was at the Lincoln game, so I've only seen like bits and pieces. But the stats read like it was a very close game, very tight game, as you'd expect. And yeah, that goal makes all the difference. 2 teams with good defenses for the most part that needs sometimes just a little bit of inspiration or a little bit of a luck, maybe even just to sort of break that sometimes. And Derby obviously got the goal that mattered.
Absolutely, and that result leaves Bolton third. And without a league victory at Pride Park since 1981. Pretty long stuff, that one. So we've been waiting a while for a victory at Derby. So that was the top 4. If we include the top 5, we'll cover very briefly. Barnsley.
Briefly? What do you mean briefly?
It was only 0-0, So Barnsley were at home to Cheltenham, who themselves are fighting at the bottom, as we've covered many times on here. Having been at the game, I can tell you, very disappointing in terms of sort of the chances, the opportunities that Barnsley got themselves into. But they just couldn't find the back of the net, which, to add to your cliche, if you don't shoot, you don't score. Barnsley didn't shoot. They got loads of crosses into the box, but no player could really get on the end of it. They almost seemed to just walk it in. Tried to walk it in. They couldn't. They were always, sort of not taking advantage a bit of Cheltenham, but Cheltenham had obviously come for the draw, and they were happy with that, just playing long ball. And it worked for Darrell Clark's side, and they'll be really happy, I think, with that point, and they'll be much happier than Barnsley, who are on a bad run of form at the moment.
Yeah, definitely. It's a great point for Cheltenham. It really is. It's not a point you'd expect them to pick up, and every point matters in a sort of a race and a cling to try and stay up. So yeah, a great point from a Cheltenham perspective. A surprise result, this one. I sort of saw it and was a bit just taken aback by it. Really, you mentioned the fact that Bolton hadn't won at Pride Park since, what was it, 81.
Yeah.
Barnsley haven't won at Oakwell for 3 games now. So I'm not sure what's happened there.
Not quite. Not quite as bad.
It's still not great though, is it?
No.
It's the first time they've failed to score in a game since November 11th. That was against Derby, and it's happened one more time in the season against Blackpool. So a rarity that they failed. That's in the league, I think. To sort of clarify that stat, it's a rarity that Barnsley don't get themselves on the score sheet. They got the sends on the score sheet against Lincoln in that 5-1, obviously, the other week.
Oh, go on, yeah, plug it again, go on.
There they are, and then the draw
any opportunity.
That's it, and then I'm not even a Lincoln fan. You still got to plug it, and then the draw to Bolton, obviously the other one in that run of 3 games. So, I would say worrying signs. We've got a Barnsley fan. How worrying is it in terms of a push for the automatics, because it's looking distant?
Well, that's the thing. About 2 weeks ago, it was in Barnes' hands, and then they dropped points at home to Bolton, and then the heavy defeat at home to Lincoln has sort of done us, really. And I think we were within 3 points of the top 2 with a game in hand, maybe even 2 games in hand. We were in a great opportunity. And one of those games in hand, we ended up drawing. After going 2-0 up, drawing 2-2 to a late equaliser against Bolton. And I think, you mentioned there, I think that the players are suffering with a bit of a hangover. The following game, home at Lincoln. Just something isn't quite right, really. Just not quite clicking these past few games. But as I said, we created chances on Saturday, but the team altogether just didn't have the shooting boots on, which is incredibly frustrating. We went in sort of shocked at 0-0 at half time, thinking, we deserve at least 2, if not 3. We deserve to be at least 2-0 up, if not 3-0 up at half time because of the chances we created. We created some more in the second half, but not as many. It's frustrating. Many fans, probably include myself, will probably see that as automatic over. We just got to be happy with a playoff spot and finish strong in the hope that we don't have to play Lincoln in the playoffs when we get to that point. So it's a little bit disappointing given the position we were in. That being said, we do. I think we're a joint with Peterborough. We've got the most games to play.
Yeah,
in the
that's
league.
it. I'll just have obviously look at the table. The 7 points off Derby you are, which is the same as Peterborough, and you both have a game in hand. On Peterborough and Bolton. So,
and then our game against Portsmouth, which is meant to be this Saturday, has been rearranged because of international call-ups. Yeah. Don't get me started on that. It's a whole different issue. But so it means that we'll have 2 games in hand against Portsmouth and then Stevenage. So tough games, and it's like what I'm going to repeat what you said earlier, Jamie. In that sort of we're all playing each other, so it does make it exciting. That being said, it makes it very frustrating because they're not that any match is, but they're not necessarily guaranteed 3 points. If you get what I mean, sort of. Then they're going to be tough fixtures, so it could go either way. But it's not out of it yet. but it looks more and more unlikely that we will be able to chase for the automatic spot in League One.
Yeah, you've sort of hit a rough patch of form at the wrong time, haven't you? Where you've sort of
Absolutely, yeah.
the wheels aren't off the track, but they've teetered a little bit at really just the wrong time, because it's sort of put you back a few steps where you weren't you were pretty much touching the automatics, weren't you, just a few weeks ago? So an interesting one how that's just developed and sort of seemingly come out of nowhere, that you sort of fell off. But talking about coming out of nowhere, Seb,
Oh, here we go. Go on.
I have to
Go on.
get it in. Unbelievable form, obviously, at Lincoln. 13 games now. They're unbeaten, and another 5 goals against Bristol Rovers this time. They've scored 16 goals in 3 games. They're the first team in the EFL to score 5 or more goals in 3 games in a row since 2022. Can you have a punt at which team did it in 2022 in the
whole EFL?
The EFL?
Have a clue? Is it
The Championship?
Champ?
No, it's not quite our area. It's a difficult one, this.
I would have said Leeds, but I think they're in the Premier League. They weren't there. I'll go with Norwich.
Oh, you're not a million miles away in sort of a terms of a yo-yo team. Fulham. It was their season. They came down. They scored 5 or more games in.
Wow, right. Okay.
5 or more goals, in 3 straight games. Yeah, but on Lincoln, that they are just unbelievable at the minute. I mean, I've never seen football quite like it in person, and I messaged you after the Cambridge game on Tuesday night just to say I've never seen anything like this in my life, and it's sort of come again on Saturday. 6 clean sheets in 7, and the man of the match was given to the goalkeeper, actually, Lucas Jensen, who he kept out Chris Martin repeatedly. It was about 3 or 4 counter-attacks he had, and it was one of those where the 5-0 scoreline flatters Lincoln, but they did play really well, don't get me wrong. But it was a game where Lincoln took all of their chances and Bristol Rovers just didn't. They had enough chances for it to be 3-3 at half-time, really, with the amount of counter-attacks they were managing to get. But obviously just didn't get on the score sheet. And it was a really chaotic game. We had a red card in the second half, 2 yellow cards for Ethan Orahan. Michael Scabala got booked. There was a penalty that was if listeners or viewers haven't seen the penalty, do find it, because it's one of the worst decisions I've seen all season. And the Bristol Rovers man missed it by a mile. He slipped and it landed pretty much out the ground. So it was an eventful game. It was non-stop while we were trying to write our tweets and our match report and things. It was all go, and you looked up and there was another goal, and then you wrote it down. You looked up, there was something, and it was just all go. Really chaotic game, and that sort of summed up this run for Lincoln. They've just been so all action and energetic and just relentless, and that's just the way they're playing at the minute, and it's working wonders. Michael Scabala has done such great things with that team, and they're only 2 points off the playoffs now. Their next game, like you mentioned, with your lot, Barnsley, that there's no game because of the international break. Lincoln's the same. Their game against Oxford has been pushed back to April, so their next game now is Good Friday against Leyton Orient. It was sort of just a few too many points off the playoffs, but still there or thereabouts. So I think that turns to a huge game. Yeah, but go on.
I think Lincoln are definitely the dark horses now for the playoffs. As things stand, as you said, only 2 points off it. I just think the form that they're on, the momentum that they've got within the squad, I can definitely see them pushing for the top 6. And if anything, I would not want to face them at all in the playoffs, really.
Well, do you want my hot take then, Seb? As soon as you just teed it up there, I said if Lincoln get into the playoffs, they will win the playoffs, because it's all about momentum, isn't it?
Yeah.
You see so many times that the team in 6th wins the playoff and not the team in 3rd, because of that, just the momentum of getting into the playoffs that Lincoln will have if they do manage it. I think that'll just see them over the line. They'll have too much for a Bolton or a Barnsley, who are sort of hit a bit more of a rough patch. But obviously the if is if they can get there, because there's a lot of teams in and around them. So
I probably have to agree with you. Because Barnes had that back in 2016. They clinched 6th place, and they I don't think anyone fancied them in the playoffs, but we ended up winning Millwall, who were third, pretty comfortably in the final. But yeah, I won't put it past them really, Lincoln, based on the form that they're on, based on the results that we've seen, especially this last week. Yeah, they're just on just storming the league, really. Yeah, and I genuinely think they'll push for the playoffs. They're my ones to go for it. And whatever happens, I just hope Barnsley don't face them because they were all over us. Well, not Saturday, just gone one before. They were all over us. They know what to do with them. So it'd just be a torrid afternoon. Should we draw Lincoln in the playoffs? But a little bit of time yet, so all could change.
Yeah, definitely. Loads of time. That's the key. I guess it's worth mentioning sort of the other teams in and around that briefly before we obviously head to a break. Being Stevenage, I guess the main one to look at, in that they've had a little bit of a dip in form. They need to recover from that. They've got a game in hand that'll help them in that. They are also 2 points off the playoffs like Lincoln, but that game in hand obviously can help them if they can pick up something from it. They lost to Leyton Orient on Saturday, and that follows that loss to Peterborough, obviously, on TV in midweek. So 4 games without a win for them and back-to-back defeats for Steve Evans' side. The game in hand, sort of the saving grace for something that's turned sour quite quickly for Stevenage. And that tells you how good Lincoln have been. And Oxford has to be mentioned. They're the team that have took that playoff spot that Stevenage, that blip in form, has been capitalised on.
Absolutely, yeah. For me, I think Oxford will drop out. As you said, they're sort of taking advantage of results in their favour, but I don't think anyone can stand in Lincoln City's way at this present stand. But yeah, there's still a lot to play for. You know, there's still a couple of teams that could even push for that last playoff spot, but it will be very interesting. And as I mentioned right at the top, it's all to play for, both it's sort of in the automatics, in the playoff spots, and even in the relegation battle as well. We'll just take a short break, and then we'll be back to discuss the rest of Saturday's fixtures from League One. Welcome back to the Lower League Looks League One podcast with myself, Seb Jones, and Jamie Johnson. As ever, we've just spoken about the automatic place race. That's a rhyme that I didn't intend to do, but the automatic sort of push. We've spoken a little bit about the playoff contention as well, and the fine form that Lincoln City currently find themselves. But there's a lot more going on in the league. We're just going to sort of discuss the rest of the results. We'll carry on from sort of what we mentioned before the break, in the sort of the teams just outside the top 6. One of which is Leyton Orient. Now they were away to Stevenage, and Stevenage, although above them in the league, fell to a defeat to Orient, Jamie.
Yeah, we mentioned the sort of the bad stats from a Stevenage perspective of those 4 games unbeaten, but Leyton Orient, it keeps their slender hopes of playoffs alive. 2 defeats and a draw, that draw being against Port Vale before this win, and it's sort of a turn up for that form, isn't it? That they've gone on a little bit of a rough patch, and they've come out of it with a big win away from home at Stevenage. Obviously, not an easy place to go at all. They're just about in the running for the playoffs. 5 points off it obviously doesn't sound a lot, only a couple of games. But it's the fact that there's a few teams above them, isn't it, really, I guess, that Lincoln, Stevenage and Blackpool are all in better positions. The huge game is obviously Good Friday when they travel to the LNER Stadium. The key to that one, I think, is worth mentioning that, I talked about it when we talked about the Lincoln game, Ethan Overhand's red card. That means he won't be available for that game. It means Lincoln have one midfielder available to them for that game, that being a Ted Bishop that has a bit of a niggle the week before this one, with Ethan Hamilton out for the season, Conor McGrandle's out for the season. So that they've been pulling Jack Moylan and who's a attacking midfielder and a striker usually, and number 10, I guess, is his prime position. And Danny Mandreu is mainly a left winger. They've been pulling them into the central midfield to make two attacking midfielders with Orahan providing an anchor behind them. But
they don't have that, do they now? Yeah.
Exactly, yeah. He won't be available, so they will be playing without an anchor. It's interesting to see where they go. I don't want to sort of delve too much into tactics and speculate. If it could be Ted Bishop, it could be Jack Burrows, the fullback they've got on loan from Coventry. It could be Lasse Sorensen. Obviously, used to be a centre mid before he's been sort of revolutionised as this right wing back. So
yeah.
It's all interesting to see where that goes. I think that's.
Yeah.
Are you going to ask me how much though will that affect the game? Because that's what I was.
No. I'm just. Well, not that exact question, but I'm just thinking, how will Lincoln fare without that sort of protection in front of the back five, if you like?
I think it's really difficult.
Without that midfielder sort of dropping and just keeping guard like all good CDMs do. But you've got. You mentioned there, Moylan and Mandreu sort of pushing on, but without them, surely having created a nice sort of balance in midfield over the past couple of games where they've won by quite a lot of goals in terms of margin. I think it's one of those that sort of goes slightly under the radar because the team are doing well, and ultimately that starts from the back. And Lincoln are going to miss sort of a piece of the jigsaw, if you like, with the suspension. So. I guess how will it impact them? Because they're going to lose a piece of a working cog, aren't they?
It's not just a cog in the machine. It's probably the biggest cog in the machine in that what he does for the team in terms of his position of sitting in front of that defence and guarding that defence, but that everything comes through Ethan Horahan. He gets the ball, he'll spread it left, he'll spread it right, and he'll push it forward to the other midfielders. He's so integral to how that team plays under Mike Kennedy and now under Michael Scabala as well. Everything seems to have changed around him, but his role has stayed constant throughout, and he's absolutely critical to that team. So it blows it wide open, that game, because you look at it, Lincoln in such fine form. They've got a week's rest before it. It looks like it would be a comfortable win for them at home. It's blown that game wide open. It's a really difficult game to pick now. And I'm really looking forward to it in terms of one that I'll be watching, because it's as I say, wide open now in terms of what might happen there. The other two playoff contenders, obviously Blackpool and Oxford, a win and a loss between them. Blackpool losing, dropping points at Wigan. It's a real slip up, this one. I feel that it's. I mean, Wigan they're not a bad side by any stretch of the imagination. Obviously, got that result against Bolton. And they're not conceding many, Blackpool, if you look at sort of recent games, but they're not scoring enough. Seems to be the problem there. Go on.
And Jordan Rhodes out as well, probably for the season, I think. Injured in the game away at Wigan at the weekend. So he'll be a real miss, only just coming back from another injury, and then he got the red card, which was eventually rescinded, but I think he will be out for the season, and possibly the last time that the Blackpool fans have seen him in a Tangerine shirt. They'll hope not, but you just don't know what happens in the summer. But he will be massive miss, given sort of he has been great for Blackpool this season. In fact,
since it makes it even harder, doesn't it? You're struggling to score enough already, and then you miss your top scorer. I think he's the fourth top scorer in the entire league. He's up there at the very least, and he's a huge loss. And I mean, they'll be hoping he's not out for the season, because that can sort of really dent their playoff hopes. They're only 3 points off the playoffs, but it's a big few points they've dropped here, I feel, at Wigan. Again, that they're mid-table, obviously a Lancashire derby, but they should be picking up points there. Oxford did pick up points. They rebounded nicely from that 5-0 defeat in midweek, and they're into the playoffs miraculously. They've still not won back-to-back games all season. It'd be interesting to see if they do that come Easter weekend.
But the side that they did beat, Port Vale.
Well, that's it, isn't it? That's where I was going. They can't buy a win. Darren Moore can't buy a win. 14 games now without one, and if my maths serves me correct, it's 4 points out of a possible 42. available.
Really poor.
And they've not picked up a win in 2024 as of yet. So
yeah, I think he'll be massive. I think we mentioned this a couple of times, but I think he'll be massively regretting perhaps his move. And surely, as the season's gone on, there's got to be some sort of thing in his contract that if they do get relegated, then he will leave. I just can't see a manager of his caliber next season managing in League Two.
I think it's a manager of, I don't think ego is the right word, but a manager of how he sees himself. He sees himself as a championship manager. There's no two ways about that.
Which he is.
He
really,
he took a step down into League One, which was interesting. Rather than waiting for another job to become available, perhaps a bit higher up. But I can't see him managing in League Two. I'd be shocked if he's sticking around.
Yeah. There's got to be something sort of, a small print or something in his contract.
Yeah, perhaps. Yeah. It's one of those, it's all speculation at the minute, isn't it? Just who knows?
Yeah.
It's such a long contract, isn't it? He's got as well.
Oh yeah. Well, that's it. So it looks even silly now, really.
Yeah, it looks a bad move for all parts at the minute. A great escape. I don't want to sort of draw it off, but it would be one hell of a great escape if they do manage to stay in the league. The form they're in, they're just nowhere, and you've got to imagine the confidence is just shot in that dressing room.
Yeah.
Even though the new managers come in, there's been no new manager bounce, if that's obviously the term, the way it's described. But there's just been nothing there for them, and they're in real danger at the wrong end of the table.
They are. They're 6 points off safety, but they've still got Fleetwood and Cheltenham, who occupy the last two relegation spots within the league rankings as things stand. So it's a massive task, and I think I'd imagine Darren Moore will absolutely be regretting the sort of other fixture regarding the bottom. Involves Carlisle, and surprise, they lost again, this time to Shrewsbury, who, to be fair, to their credit, I tipped them to drop into the relegation zone, I think a few weeks ago, but they managed to get a couple of decent results, including beating Carlisle about 1-0 at home at the weekend, to sort of pull themselves not totally out of it, because you can never rule anyone out of it, but they're now 9 points off the bottom four, which is exceptional, really. And they were one of my sort of teams to drop down into either the relegation battle, at least the bottom four. But credit to them, they're beaten Carlisle. You'd imagine more or less guaranteed their safety. Do you think, Jamie?
Yeah, I won't beat around the bush. I'll read you out my notes on the stats. Shrewsbury dominated. Shrewsbury are safe, Carlisle are down, and
nice and simple.
Too much else to say nice there. Carlisle are in real trouble. They just don't seem like a team that's going to be able to pick up. What is it? 16 points adrift. It's just not going to happen. It's just not.
Yeah, I wonder. My maths is not that good, so you might be able to help given your recent math stats. I wonder at what point it's mathematically impossible for Carlisle to not survive, given they've got 23 points from 38.
Well, 16 to get 16 points, that's 5 wins and a draw, isn't it? So that is obviously 6 games.
And they've only got 8.
8 left.
No. 8 left.
So they need to.
So in 2 games' time, basically.
Yeah, if they lose the next 2 and Cambridge win, I guess, one of them, then maybe that is writing on the wall. Maybe the maths is a little bit shaky, but either way, it paints the picture that they're 16 points adrift with only 8 games to go, which is 24 points, isn't it, to play for? So, awful situation for them. They're down, simply put, really, aren't they? There's no real way they're staying up.
Yeah.
Someone that maybe will stay up is Fleetwood. They're 5 points off safety. The game in hands go against them, but they are on a decent bit of form. They're 6 games unbeaten, but the key to that is they've only won 1. Which is the negative. Obviously, they're not losing games, but they're not winning them, and they need to win games to get out of the sticky situation they're in. They drew 1-1 to Charlton. Man of the match there was Alfie May. He's got 5 in 5 now, the informed man, one of the informed men in the league. Fleetwood equalised late on, but a point, as nice as a point is and as nice as it is to keep that unbeaten run going, a point's not good enough at this stage.
No, yeah. So you mentioned the sort of consecutive draws that they've had. As you just said, they drew against Charlton at the weekend. Before that, 0-0 against Bristol Rovers. Before that, 0-0 against Stevenage. Before winning Wigan Athletic, and then prior to the Wigan win, drawing 2-2 away at Port Vale, and then 1-1 away at Exeter. So lots of draws, which is good to get sort of points on board, but ultimately they need 3 points to get out of the position that they're in, and it's just not coming for them, really. A point's better than none, really. If I'm trying to put a slight positive sort of spin on things, a point is better than none, but ultimately when you're in the position that Fleetwood are in, you need 3 points. You cannot be sort of just always getting points, singular points away from games. You need to be picking up 3, and they just haven't been doing so enough times this season, especially in the last run. There will often be some positives in that run. A couple of clean sheets in there as well, and it's proven they can score as well. So it's not like they're all 0-0 draws. So they can score goals. They're just not scoring enough to win them, if you like what I mean.
Yeah, no, that does make sense. It's a shame for them, I guess, that they're sort of picking up points, but just not enough. The draws, they've drawn 13 games this season, which is the same as Lincoln, and only Charlton with 15 have more draws than Fleetwood. They've won just 7 games this season. Carlisle's 5, the only team that have won less. So 5 points off. The games in hand do go against them, like I mentioned. Everyone in that relegation fight as at least 1 game in hand. Cheltenham and Port Vale have 2. So not a nice situation for them in terms of the points that can be gained on them, and the fact that they're not winning enough games. Speaking of not winning enough games, Seb, what's happened to Gary Monk and Cambridge? He's come in. They got a draw in his first game against Northampton, and since then they've scored 0 goals and shipped 10. Obviously 6-0 against Lincoln on Tuesday, and 4-0 here against Reading. I couldn't quite believe this. I was expecting Reading to win, but the scoreline really took me aback. Even bearing in mind, they were really, really poor against Lincoln on Tuesday. Lincoln absolutely played them off the park. And as good as Lincoln are, they come up against a really bad team, but they're in real trouble.
Yeah, they are. Yeah, 10 goals conceded in a week. As you said, it's really interesting because after that Lincoln game, there's an interview with Gary Monk, and he sort of said that his side have more than enough to stay in the league. Sort of a lot of positive talk, despite his side just losing 6-0, and then the next year they're going to lose 4-0. So, not a great look really for Cambridge. Just about sitting ahead of that relegation zone by 4 points, but Cheltenham could easily catch up on them, really, as could Fleetwood, as we said. But not. I'd imagine not the sort of impact that Gary Monk will have wanted to have on Cambridge. 2 miserable defeats in the past week or so. So not good, really. And next up, they play Barnsley on Easter Sunday away from
3
home.
points,
so,
isn't it?
Well, it's the way we're going at the moment. So the next up is away at Barnsley, which, jokes aside, I think it'll be another loss for them, really.
Yeah, definitely. And then the rest after that, they've got Wigan, Blackpool, Charlton. I mean, it doesn't get much easier.
No, not at all. So then you do start to question, and then you realise that they are in real danger, and Gary Monk was brought in to keep them away from danger, but ultimately just making the job worse so far.
Yeah, the goals is the concern, I think. They conceded, obviously, 10, like we've mentioned. Before that, they were conceding 1 or 2. they conceded 3 against Portsmouth in February, but not really. Apart from that, conceding more than 1 or 2 goals this calendar year. And yes, I don't really know what Gary Monk has done. I mentioned it on Thursday podcast. I was talking to the Cambridge, one of their media admins, who was sat behind us in the press box for their game, and sort of said Gary Monk's not really in that first game, didn't really change anything. Obviously, he'd only been in the job 48, 72 hours, so not really time to do much. But whatever he has changed, he needs to change back, because 10 goals in 2 conceded
it's really bad. Yeah,
it's remarkable. I know Lincoln obviously are in a really good form, and you can look maybe that one you can't forgive it because it's 6-0, but a bit more understandable. Whereas Reading aren't in amazing form. They don't tend to score tons and tons of goals, and they put 4 past them unanswered. So it was a staggering scoreline, and he's got a real job on now, Gary Monk. We mentioned 4 points clear, a couple of games in hand below them. It could turn sour very quickly. So yeah, I don't think they're out of the woods. Interested to see what you think on Burton. They're on level on points with Cambridge. They lost 1-0 to Exeter. It was a Zach Jules red card. Just in first half injury time for Exeter, but they managed to hang on. And you look at sort of the graphs, you see them on football, don't you? Like the spikes of who's got attacking momentum, and it was all Burton in the second half. But they couldn't add anything. Just 1 point from their last 18 available, and they couldn't. Go on.
No, you finish it.
I was going to say they couldn't pick up anything despite playing 45 minutes against 10 men, and that's not a positive sign.
Yeah, well, that's it. I think that'll disappoint Martin Patson the most. The fact that they did play such a long time with the man advantage and couldn't take any opportunities that they had on goal. I think that'll be really a sucker punch blow really for Burton. And again, they're not really safe either. Themselves just 4 points clear from relegation, but they do have a couple of good players. You know, Hugo up top. Oshilaja seems to play everywhere on the pitch these days, but he's a good option as well. So there's decent players about. It's just they need to step up and show the quality. Carriol came off the bench as well on Saturday. He's been around the block a long time, so knows what it takes. Really, bit of an awkward one, really, because you do look at that and you see that they played against 10 men for the whole of the second half, and they've not managed to capitalise on that. Sometimes teams play against 10 men and sort of batter them, but Burton just didn't do that despite having the lion's share of the chances. So I think that'll disappoint them the most.
Yeah. I think that's the concerning part, isn't it? That they've been thrown a lifeline in a way, that they've got 45 minutes against 10 men to try and get a first win for what would have been 6 games, and that they couldn't manage it. They couldn't even pick up a point. So they're not out of the woods. 5 points clear, I think we mentioned, joint with Cambridge. So really, really not out of the woods.
They're not out of the woods at all. And then just finally to come on to the. I think the only game we've not covered is between Wickham and Northampton, sort of the clash of mid-table in League One, if you like. Wickham coming on top of this one by 2-0, and it was Butcher with both the goals.
What an exciting game. Mid-table mediocrity at its finest. No, I do, Jess. You mentioned Matt Butcher. He obviously scored a brace in the first half. And the only interesting note I've sort of picked out of this one is Wickham now have 5 wins in a row against Northampton. That includes a penalty shootout victory. I think that was in the Bristol Street Motors Trophy.
Wow.
Was then probably the Papa John's or the Johnston Paint John's Trophy, whatever, you know what I mean?
What's the opposite to bogey
check a
team?
trade. What's
the opposite to bogey team? Because clearly Wickham aren't.
Is there an opposite to a bogey?
Well, do you know what I mean? So,
Lucky Charm, maybe? Should we go for that?
Yeah, clearly.
They're doing very well against Northampton anyway. 5.
Basically,
that was my good thing to pick up on Thursday, because we were doing our little predictions, me and Callum, as I stepped in for Sam on Thursday, and Callum predicted a Northampton win, and then I said, well, the 4 wins in a row for Wickham, I'll go for Wickham,
Fair
and
enough. Yeah.
I'm happy with that. They've obviously come out on top. Yeah, battle for mid-table. Neither team going up, neither team going down. It's just all about maybe trying to get a top half finish, isn't it? I guess that's the thing to fight for those mid-table teams. So
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
routine 2-0 win. Nothing really else to say.
Yeah, Wickham in 12th and Northampton in 14th, but both sides are on 50 points, along with Wigan and Bristol Rovers. I think that's about it, isn't it, this week?
Yeah, that's all the games. It's been an exciting weekend in terms of
It
some
has,
of the bigger games. Obviously, the top 4 all playing each other, and Lincoln scoring another 5. So there's been some sort of flashpoints. But yeah, that is all in terms of the games. No midweek games this week in League One. You'll be delighted to know. Have a bit of a rest, and that international break sort of messes with things slightly because there's a
sort of
few less
halves,
games, isn't there? Yeah.
about half of the games, more or less. Not too much to talk about off the field, neither. But yeah, plenty to talk about on the pitch in terms of the results that we saw on the Saturday just gone. So yeah, I think that about wraps it up from myself and Jamie. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter. Do you want a little plug here, Jamie?
Go on then. My Twitter is jjohnson_16. All my right info about Lincoln City is all on there. Everything else that happens that I do goes on my Twitter. So yeah, that's the place to go for that.
Sweet. Mine is Seb E, the letter E, Jones. You can find me on X, formerly Twitter, as it's now called. But yeah, thank you very much for joining us, and we'll see you next time.